Hi, my name is Finkelstein. I am a junior here at the University of Delaware. I double majored in criminal justice and psychology, and I will be discussing the 3 types of crime scene photography.
My name is Julianna Hansen-Fliedner. I'm a junior from New Jersey. I'm a communications major with an art minor, and I'll be talking about how crime scene photography applies to the criminal justice system.
Hi, I'm Regan. I'm an interpersonal communication major with minors in journalism and sociology. I'm a junior here from New Jersey, and I will be discussing the scientific explanation of crime scene photography.
And I'm Leah Kelly. I'm Philadelphia. I'm a criminal justice and psychology major. I'm a sophomore, and I'll be talking about the case study.
So first we're going to start off with the scientific explanation of crime scene photography. So it is one of the 4 key elements of crime scene documentation, and it's really important because a crime scene is never recreated. So that's why each crime scene really should be photographed completely and entirely as possible. Photographs are the best source of documenting a scene for scene accuracy, and Julianna will actually go into more depth about this later. Before addressing the shutter, the photographer must do 3 things. So the first thing is the scene or the primary subject must be composed. The second is to have proper exposure, and that should be determined, and then the camera must be focused. So next we're going to move on to the cardinal rules of crime scene photography. So the first is to fill the frame. So this is getting closer in order to gather more detail in the photo. So we have to make sure that we put in as many pixels as possible over the primary subject. Zoom in to eliminate unwanted objects around the primary subject, then to compose it with the appropriate horizontal or vertical camera viewpoint, and then to avoid having the primary subject so close to the edges that part of it can be cut off when it's printed out. So eliminating irrelevant detail in your photo in an attempt to improve your photo, that's called eliminating background noise. So this background noise can include the background, foreground, areas to the left to the right, and to make sure that we have shadow control and lens flare are also important. The second cardinal rule is to maximize depth of field. So that is the depth of field is the variable range from foreground to background of what appears to be in focus in the photo. So focusing to maximize this depth of field is a distinguishing feature of crime scene photographers that can separate them from others. If things are out of focus, it can be argued in court that it's not a fair and accurate representation of the scene. So a defense attorney may successfully argue that enough evidence was found in the areas that are out of focus. So we can ensure to maximize depth of field by using reciprocal exposure that uses the smallest aperture, hyperfocal focus when infinity is in the background, and then zone focus when infinity is not in the background, and then pre-focus when the camera is at its closest focusing distance by rotating the focus ring to its shortest focusing distance. The third cardinal rule is to keep the film plane parallel. So keeping the film plane parallel can help eliminate issues with scale, focus, and flash. However, there are some exceptions to this rule, and this can include windows or mirrors, highly reflective subjects, and not having enough room to get parallel in the photo. So with mid-range photos, you can try to arrange the subject and the fixed features of the scene so that they are at the same or close to the same distance from you as possible, so that it creates an isosceles triangle between the subject and what you're photographing and yourself. Having the film plane parallel to evidence is really critical with close-up photos because if the film is not parallel to the subject, the close-up cannot be used for comparison. So make sure to take the photo horizontally so farther away is wider, and you can see how far away things are from each other. So there are a few recurring problems in crime scene photography. So the first being identification issues. So this is an issue of what is in the photo. It can involve creating photos where the viewer can get lost in a scene and the photo fails to illustrate what is in the picture or why the photo was taken in the first place. The second is orientation issues. So this is the problem of where is it? So this means the viewer is lost in the scene or has no orientation of where it was taken. Photos are taken of an object with no scene reference or which orientation is not clear. The third would be confusion issues, so that something had been altered, and this is a problem of which photo came first. And creating photos where the viewer is unclear of which item is being photographed, and it can show the crime scene in altered states. And then the fourth is incomplete documentation issues. So this is an issue of not enough pictures. So incomplete documentation can occur when the crime scene team fails to capture really pertinent scene details, and too few photos are exposed, or really crucial areas of the photo are not shown. Methodical scene processing techniques can help eliminate this issue, which Miller will go over next.
All right, so welcome to my section of the project, and I'm going to go over the 3 different types of photography seen in CSI cases and for investigators. So first off, like Katie talked about, it's very important to have film playing parallel. When I mean film playing parallel, it's important that you don't just take a picture of the scene that you're taking pictures of. You got to make sure that you have an accurate description of the scene. So if you look at my slide, it was also talked in the class, but it's just a really good description of how this must be seen. So this is a picture of an exterior overall photo of the scene, and the bottom side, the bottom left, is a picture of what is a diagonal shot from an angle. And you can't really get a good depth perception of what this building actually looks like. So it's important to get a film plane parallel picture, and this is done by taking a picture with a nice 90-degree angle, making sure that you get the entire picture of what you're trying to show off. Now if you look at the right side, so if you're looking at the slides right now, there's a picture of a diagonal shot from each corner. This is how it used to be taken. Crime scene investigators used to take 4 pictures in every single corner. This is an interior overall pictures photography. And you take 4 pictures from each corner of the room. And this can be problematic because you don't get an accurate description of scale, and it's hard to actually see evidence, so it's kind of misleading. So Katie already talked a little briefly about our overall photos. And overall photos help get a general understanding of the scene. When you first get to a scene, there's exterior overall photos, and you want to take a picture. It depends if you have a warrant to go into place. If you have a search warrant, are you allowed to go into the building yet? If you don't have a search warrant and you need a search warrant, it's important to take pictures at the time of this event. When you get the 911 call, crime scene investigators, if they can't get into the building yet, it's important for you to take pictures of the building where the scene was committed, the crime was committed, and of viewing away from the scene. Because it's important to get a good understanding of how the crime scene could have went. Pictures are 1,000 words, and it's important to encompass everything that could have happened. So when you need the evidence for the future, for trials, for any situation, you could go back to it with pictures. So pictures also bridge the gap between location and evidence. So as Katie talked about, there is 3 different types of pictures. There's overall pictures, mid-range, and close-ups. And it's important to get a good understanding of what each of those are. So overall is just to get a well understanding of what could have broadly happened before you get close up on evidence. And Katie already touched upon this topic in the 4th cardinal rule about the lighting. It's important that if there's weird lighting in the pictures, you need to take pictures that will be able to explain what could have happened. You need well-organized thoughts. So if a juror doesn't understand how a crime scene could have occurred, you need to spell it out to them. And the pictures do a great job doing that. So it's important that you have the lighting well lit. So here are some pictures of our overall photos. On the left side, it's our exterior overall photo, and this is facing the scene. Say if a crime occurred inside of this little building, and say crime scene investigators can't get in there yet, or they want to understand when they're showing the scene off, it's important to see, is there any way of exiting the scene? There's some windows, there is a door. Crime scene photographers' overall pictures help understand what could have happened. And then the other side is an interior overall photo. And this just helps because if you're walking into a room, it's important to have a film plane parallel. You get to see exactly what could have happened, where, and it helps bridge the gaps for any evidence that may be shown in court in another part of an investigation. So our mid-range photos are very important. The mid-range is really actually one of the most important pictures in my opinion because it helps you understand, it helps the researchers, it helps the investigators see, okay, based on the overall pictures, the landscape, where the specific buildings, structures are formed, and what was used, say if there's any blood droplets or any potential weapons that were used in a crime, it's important to see where they were located in a crime. So the mid-range photos just really helps gap what was evidence and what is just in the surroundings of the situation that could have occurred. And it's important to use film plane parallel for these also. You're at a nice 90-degree angle. Make sure that your pictures come out well developed. And with crime scene photography, it's important that if you're an investigator and you're taking pictures, it's your job to never delete evidence because that's illegal. You can't do that. And it's important to, if a picture doesn't come out good, you look at the picture, take another picture. Alright, so here are just some examples on this slide of what some mid-range photos are, and they help gap the differences in overall pictures and the close-ups. So here's a close-up, here's an overall, and here's a mid-range picture, so you kind of could see what happened. And you could see there was a knife, there's some blood. This was my own scene that I had to make for our class, our earlier project, but just wanted to give another example of what mid-range photos do for criminal cases. Say if you're in a trial, it's important that jurors or prosecutors, defendants, they get all the evidence, and crime scene photography helps in that situation for evidence. So the last type of evidence is close-ups. And close-ups are very, very important because could show the murder weapons, it could show different patterns of blood, it could show different things, and it's just important to get a good photograph of it. So there's a few different ways to do this, and in situ is a great example of why crime scene photography is so important. Because when you're taking pictures and you're a crime scene investigator, you don't really have many opportunities. Once this crime scene is open to the public, everything is ruined. You can't use anything for evidence. So it's very important to take a lot of pictures. It's important to follow the different paths that Katie talked about in the past in her part of the project because you want to have evidence for trials. It's people's lives that you're playing with, like justice, come on. And also for close-up pictures, it's really important that you have labeled scale, and you need to have film plane parallel for this also. It needs to be a good picture. You don't want to go to a trial and be unprepared.
Okay, so now I'm going to talk about how crime scene photography applies to the criminal justice system. And there are many benefits to crime scene photography as it is one of the most accurate ways to document a crime scene. So the first thing is telling the story. As this is the most accurate source of documentation, this really tells the story better than any spoken word or any other type of evidence shown in the courtroom. And it's also really important to put the jury there, and this allows for these outside people to really fully understand what could have happened in this crime scene, and it really puts them in the scene. The second benefit is crime scene reconstruction, which is a vital tool for further investigation, and this allows for the crime scene investigators to go back into the scene at a later point and find out more information and figure out where evidence could have been or what could have happened. And this really just helps lead to more evidence by retracing the crime scene. So the next way that crime scene photography applies to criminal justice is triggering witness recollection in court. And this can assist victims or witnesses in remembering important details that they may have forgotten or may not be at first thinking of when they're in the courtroom testifying or being asked questions by the prosecutor or the defense team. And this is a really important tool to keep statements truthful and fully inclusive, as if the photo shows a specific type of evidence, the defendant or witness or victim has to speak truthfully about it as it's shown in court. The next application and last one that I'll be talking about is the importance of skillful photos in court. And this is shown as where poorly taken photos can leave room for invalidity in the courtroom, where the defense team could easily argue that something important was missed or out of focus, and this is why the last few cardinal rules that we talked about are very important in ensuring that your photos are clear, correctly composed, and film plane parallel. So those are some very important reasons why crime scene photography is a very important part of the criminal justice system. And so next, Leah is going to talk about some interesting case studies having to do with this topic.
So now we're going to talk about the case study, and how it applies to photography issues, and I chose to do the O.J. Simpson case because a lot of people know that case. There were a lot of details in it of why O.J. Simpson is free now, but I want to focus on the photography issues because there's actually a lot of those in the case that not a lot of people know about. So first up, an incriminating bloody fingerprint was found and was only documented in Detective Furman, who was the lead detective on the case, in his notes, but it was never properly collected, so all that we have of it is in his notes, and then it was lost, which probably could have played a crucial part in the court. So next, a lot of the photos do not include scales, which can make the viewer get lost in the scene because you take the close-up picture of the object and you don't know how big it is or where it is in the scene, and that creates orientation issues. Next, a lot of photos were taken that were not properly labeled or logged into the system, which can make it almost impossible to match it up to the evidence, the physical evidence. And next, evidence was accessed by unauthorized personnel, so that made the police work look very sloppy to the jury because the defense team jumped on that. And there was also lost documentation of blood, so when O.J. gave blood, the police lost a full vial of it, which in turn goes into the claims of planted evidence. There were a lot of claims from the defense team that the LAPD planted blood on specific evidence and in turn made O.J. look not guilty. This in turn cast doubt on the reliability of the evidence, so they could say that since the evidence was wrongly handled, how can you really trust any of it? And the jury went with that, which is why O.J. Simpson is free today.
So, in conclusion, we have a few points. Crime scene photographers must be efficient and strategic when taking photos to ensure that they can sufficiently be used for evidence.
Photography is very important in a courtroom. It's like literally evidence.
Many aspects of the criminal justice system highly depend on the benefits of crime scene photography.
If you don't follow these rules, somebody's got some explaining to do.
Mm-hmm.